On this video, we're going to be looking at positive externalities. If you've watched my video on internalities of education and negative externalities, a lot of this will make a lot of sense and be easy for you to pick up. So some definitions. A private benefit is the gain to the individual economic unit, the person that's actually making the decision, of their decision to either produce or consume a good. The external benefit is the positive impact to third parties of that decision, so people who are not involved in that actual decision. The social benefit is the private benefit plus the external benefit, because that is the cost to all of the economic units in society. On the video on private costs and benefits of education, we worked out that the opportunity cost, the cost effectively of doing your A-levels, is about £21,000 in terms of lost income elsewhere. The benefit from a 2011 study is substantially more than that. So logically, it does make sense for you to do that. However, if it was in the private sector, the question would be, would your family be prepared to stump up £7,000 or actually get an actual loan of £7,000 for you to do your A-levels? Now, if your answer to that is yes, then your part of the market has not been changed. But for a number of people, that answer will be no. So there will be a decrease in supply of students into higher education. There are about 350,000 students in the UK studying level 3 courses, that's A-levels and BTEC level 3s, and we know that the actual cost that people pay directly is zero. So on that demand curve, which is the marginal private benefit curve, where the price is zero, demand is 350,000. And I'm making an assumption that if people were charged 14,000, then nobody would be doing A-levels. So I've got a straight line between those two. So that is my demand curve, which shows the private benefit to the individual. Now let's look at the externalities. Well, if you're educated because you got your A-levels, well, that's going to reduce the training costs of firms because they won't need to deal with basics of education. You'll more or less understand where they are coming from. You are likely to be more efficient in your work and pick things up faster. So again, that would also reduce costs, and you are likely to make more informed or better decisions for the firm, which will increase their revenues or reduce costs. So let's assume that this benefits them by £4,000 a year. So there's going to be £4,000 of external benefit for each of those marginal students. So the marginal social benefit, which is the demand that society puts, the value, demand is value, the value that society puts on your education, is going to be £4,000 more than the benefit that you personally are going to get from it. Remember, you will benefit through a higher salary. So if this was in the private sector, obviously, the greater the price that students are prepared to pay, the more firms, schools and colleges would be prepared to move into that market. And so we'd finish up with an equilibrium, a free market equilibrium of round about 228,000 students, QF, who would be paying a price of 5,000 each. So by imposing a price of 5,000, we've managed to scare off more than 120,000 students who are currently getting their A-levels for nothing. But if we add on the marginal social benefit curve to take into account the externalities that everyone in society would want, then we would get QS students. Society would want about 300,000 students doing their A-levels. So there would be an under provision there of about 70,000 students. So if you have external benefits, the free market will under provide. So remember that in a free market, we are only producing about 228,000 students. So let's look at the student that isn't there, the 250,000th student. Well, if they were a student, they would be giving benefit to society equal to that purple line there. But the cost of educating that student is shown by the lower line as we move down to the supply curve. So the welfare loss or potential gain for that student is shown by the difference between those two lines. So every student between the 228,000th and the 300,000th will be potentially gaining if we could have moved up to that position of QS. So that yellow triangle there is the welfare loss caused by that under provision. Now you can actually label that welfare loss or welfare gain or potential welfare gain. Don't worry about that. Any of those will work. I prefer welfare loss because that's the same words that we use on the external cost diagram. Most economics teachers use welfare loss. If on the internet you see some saying welfare loss, some saying welfare gain, don't worry about it. If pushed, just write potential welfare gain. So this is the full diagram, the one that I strongly recommend that you learn, because if you can produce this in the exam on external benefits, you're going to be up there on the top of level 2. And once you start to explain it, you're going to be in level 3, which is the highest level you can get. So let's look at some other consumption markets. Well, fireworks. If you've ever seen a firework that's been walking down somewhere and thought, well, that's good, then you are getting unpaid for enjoyment. You didn't pay for that firework, but you benefit from it. So that would be an external benefit. So what about museums? Well, museums allow cultural spread, which is regarded as an external benefit. So you can talk about perhaps some of the culture involved in the country or what the artists have done, which will benefit other people. So museums are also regarded as having an external benefit. One that's very much in the news at the moment, I'm recording this during the lockdown caused by COVID, is vaccinations. Now, obviously, if you are vaccinated, it reduces the chance to almost zero of you getting the disease. But the externality is that then means that you can't pass on that disease to other people. And we might move towards herd immunity. Smallpox, for example, has been eliminated worldwide because of that vaccination process. Similarly, if you consume fitness equipment or fitness classes, then that will have internal benefits to you because you're going to be healthier, but it will also give external benefits to the firm. You are going to be more productive as a worker and you are likely to be off less often. Now, I'm now going to go into external benefits in production, not on the spec, but I'm going to be using a number of examples of where I've looked at external costs in production, so this will give you decent evaluation on those points. So airports, well, what do airports do? They bring in tourists, and that means that hotels are going to benefit at tourist resorts, at airports themselves as people are waiting for that early flight the next morning, and of course complementary travel systems to get to and from the airport like trains, buses or taxis. They're all going to benefit as a result of that airport being there. Training is a classic one. If a firm trains up its workers and those workers move to somewhere else, then the other firm will benefit from the fact that they have employed a trained worker. It's an obvious example of a market failure, because why on earth would you train up a worker if it's going to benefit someone else? Again, you don't need this diagram. But if there are external benefits in production, then the marginal social cost is going to lie below the marginal private cost because you are saving costs. Again, that is going to mean that QF, the free market output, is less than the socially desirable output QS, so there's going to be an under provision. So it doesn't matter whether we're looking at an external benefit in production or consumption, the free market will underproduce. The first evaluative point is that measuring the quantitative impact is really difficult, just the quantities. So you might say, yeah, I really like that firework, but how much did you like it? How many utils? What's your marginal utility as a result of seeing that? What about a museum? I mean, look at those kids, they're bored stupid. Or when somebody else discusses an opera, personally, I fall asleep. So the externality for me is virtually zero. Discussing a football match, however, different. Remember that y-axis isn't utils or anything like that, it's money. So not only have we got to measure the quantitative impact, we've got to turn it into a sum of money. So us enjoying that firework is turned into what, 2p, 3p, 5p, or someone talking about an opera, or a trained worker on output, because in reality you don't know. So what the difference is between a hotel receptionist who's gone through a training course and one who hasn't. You've got to actually physically turn that into a sum of money. I've said that that is impossible, not just difficult, but it's something that we have to do. And what actually has a positive externality, because we can't measure it, normally is someone's personal views, their value judgments. So we're actually in the realm of normative economics. So, for example, operas are often given hefty subsidies, but yet not many people go to operas. Football, not so much. There you've got a nuclear power station. Well, some people regard nuclear power stations as having positive externalities. Some people regard them in a very negative sense. So if you give, say, a subsidy to these things, well, that's often down to a subjective view on that particular industry. And the easy one is there might be external costs to offset the benefit. So with that fireworks display, we've got the crying kid. With the airport, we've got the noise, we've got the asthma, we've got the nitric oxide, we've got the CO2 emissions, we've got the sodium dioxide emissions to counterbalance that tourism. Lovely way of getting an evaluative paragraph. So finally, we look at the government policies that can be used. Well, the obvious one is the subsidy. So higher education is actually subsidised. In reality, you'll be paying less than the cost of your course. Green energy, like that huge wind farm in the Irish Sea, that is subsidised. Opera is subsidised. Training is subsidised. And once you're within that realm, if you're paying out money in a subsidy, the danger is the opportunity cost of government spending. Or the government can directly provide the good or service. So the NHS is free at the point of delivery. Education to pre-18s is free. Museum entry is free. And again, that gives you some idea as to the normative side, because for a number of years it wasn't. And again, there you've got the opportunity cost of government spending. So that's it on the external benefits side.